if this truly is a market that is being set free from the paper suppression because of the massive amounts of delivery across the globe, and it seems like it is, if it is, hang on tight, strong fingertips, do not let go, do not let someone talk you out of it. I think it's just beginning, but I guess we'll see now, won't we? You know, you can see also what's happening when people seem to think that these banks have unlimited power. And if you've been in this game long enough, it feels that way. And when you see a major bank like TD Bank shorting silver in a market this tight, it tells me one thing. It tells me they're trapped and in a system that ultimately is making them pretend that supply exists when it really doesn't, because TD Bank put on a trade, a big short trade. And that short trade, in fact, it's very silly to short something that's backward dated like this is. In other words, you're shorting something and the traders are paying a premium to have it right now. To me, and something that was just classified a critical mineral, the only reason you'd be stupid enough to do that is because you have to. And the funny thing about it is that they sent out a report saying we think silver's going to like 45, and they just recently got stopped out at 92. In other words, they had stop losses put in place to get them out if it went the other way, and they lost a good amount. I don't know, a couple $100 million or something. I don't know what they lost, but that's not the point. The point is that they sent out a letter saying they thought it was going the other way. They got stopped out. This was forced buying, and this is how accidents start, because you're stupid as hell to short something naked in a market that is in backwardation. And I think that, you look at what we've seen along the way, how these banks that are somewhat trapped are trying to change things to get the price back down, but they can't do it again. Even when they dump paper in the dead of night, when liquidity is the lowest and the price goes down, we see physical stress going back up. And in other words, every time it goes down, the physical's being bought. December was the largest delivery in the history of the COMEX market for the month of December. Somewhere in the neighborhood of like 68 million ounces of silver were delivered. That's not bearish. Anything to say the least for the people who saying that the top is in. And I think when you talk about all these people, the talking heads that tell you that the top is in, like TD Bank or the Jim Cramers, the part that these people miss is that even as the paper price fell, the lease rates exploded higher.
Andy Schectman says the silver market is breaking free from paper suppression as major banks like TD Bank get trapped in short positions. December 2025 saw record COMEX deliveries of 68 million ounces despite raised margins. With lease rates spiking to 8 to 9%, and structural shortages intensifying, this is not like 2011, it's just beginning. Hang on tight. Thanks for watching. Give a thumbs up and subscribe to Fine Metals for the latest insights.
I hear a lot of people saying, am I going to lose now? Should I sell? Should I take some off the table? Central banks don't buy gold because they're emotional, first and foremost. They're not catching the trend. They buy it because it's nobody's liability. Gold didn't overtake the euro because it's shiny. As far as I'm concerned, gold is doing what it's doing by default because there is no replacement for trust, period. And I think that's what it comes down to. And when you see interest costs exceeding defense spending, you can see that the system has chosen its path with it, which is debasing, printing, inflating, whatever the hell you want to call it. But this is why central banks are buying gold. This is why silver is being drained. And this is why the paper promises are BS, and they're starting to show up as such. And now let's just talk about a few other things. Going back to the financial advisors, I hear this a lot lately. You need to sell. They're looking at the charts. They're looking at the ratios. They're looking at the headlines, the ETFs. They don't look at the deliveries. They don't look at the lease rates. They don't look at backwardation. They don't look at who's shipping the metal out and who's buying it in. Where is it going? By the time this system admits stress, the positioning opportunity is already long gone. So I don't know. I just wanted to say that. Let me see. Do I have anything else here? TD I talked about. Oh, there was an interesting report in the written by VanEck. Did you see that? Financial Advisory. They said if the dollar loses reserve status. Now, what have I been saying? I've been saying it is my belief that they want to soft default on the reserve status. It's what they want to do. They want to no longer be the world reserve currency over time in order to bring back manufacturing. Triffin's dilemma says you cannot do it if you are the world reserve currency. Vice President Vance has written about it, talked about it. Jared Bernstein, the knucklehead from the chief economic advisor from the Biden administration, wrote a report, Dethrone King Dollar. It is very much well known if you retain world reserve status, you will never have a trade surplus. And I think that's where they're going. We've talked a lot about that. I mean, I've gone over it copiously on many podcasts, but VanEck comes out and says if the dollar loses reserve status, gold could surpass $39,000. It's a lot easier to put your money in a bank than to get it out. And people should remember that. But I will say emphatically, if you are ever told that you can't send your money anywhere that you want, and you are certain that you're doing it in good faith and you've done your diligence and you know where it's going and they don't let you, pull every penny you have and go find a new banking relationship because they're supposed to be there to serve you, not tell you what you can and cannot do. And that just goes to show, I guess, where we are at this stage of the game, at least as it pertains to banking and privacy, and why pretty soon everything's going to be part of the Genius Act. By January 1, everything's going to be different. There will be no more wires. There will be no more checks. It will be transferring money, in essence, instantly via a blockchain network backed by stablecoins. Now, the interesting thing is, will you be able to do it yourself like you can with Venmo or Zelle? So you don't have to go into the bank, and I would think probably you could. It still has to route through, I'm assuming, some sort of a gatekeeper, but maybe not. Point of it is that they don't deserve your business, period. Or your money or your patronage or whatever you want to call it. I'd get out of there as fast as could be. If you're in the lobby of the bank and they say that to you, you got to run as fast as you can. You need to remember whose money that is. Now, people don't realize that when they deposit money in the bank, what in essence, they're not depositing anything. They're making an unsecured loan to a bank where you are an unsecured general creditor to the bank. In other words, they take that money and retain 10% of it according to the way the laws are. And I think that the reserve requirements have been whittled down to, I don't know if they ever came back. They were nothing. But they're giving that money, lending it out in things that are returning some income, whether it be short-term treasuries or even parking it at the Fed. But that money isn't there, and it's not yours, really, any longer the way that most people think it is. Banking is not the way it used to be, but I will tell you, if a bank ever said that to me, I wouldn't even stop. I would say, give me a cashier's check for every penny I have right now. And I'd turn around and walk out, and I don't care what kind of aggravation that would cause me later on. But I think that that's unbelievable, quite frankly. And I'll tell you flat out that I had something similar when Miles Franklin was banking with BMO Harris, Bank of Montreal Harris. They had a change in policy at some point, pissed me off to no end, by the way, because not only did they say, we're closing all of your business accounts. You didn't do anything wrong. We just are not working with precious metals companies anymore. This was 15 years ago, maybe. Not quite. No, probably more like, maybe 12, 13. But they closed all of my personal accounts, including those of my wife and children. I had 3 accounts for my kids that, they were very young at the time they closed them. And with no explanation. And they said very clearly, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just bank policy. And so I understand that banks will make these types of decisions, but I moved on, and I would strongly suggest people move on if they have that kind of problem. I mean, you know the old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I wouldn't stick around to find out what they're going to do next time. Or any of those odd weight coins that they tell you are special. First of all, I wonder if they know that you and I sell precious metals. I hope they do. But any of the coins that sell the odd weight, 1/3 ounce, 1.5, 1.25, these are all first telltale signs that the company is fugazing a scam. Secondly, when they tell you that you don't want bullion coins, you want the premium coins, run as fast as you can as if you're being chased by a lion and you're coated in cooking oil. Run. All I can tell you is that people should listen to, on my YouTube channel, Miles Franklin Media, the interview I did with Dale Whitaker. And Dunnigan, I suggest you have Dale Whitaker on your show also. He is the whistleblower from, I believe, Augusta Precious Metals. And he came out and is whistleblowing against the entire industry. So those that are taking part in this kind of stuff, I think you have to listen. All of the companies he's mentioning, some of them I'm sure are, they deserve to say their side. But I will tell you that it is my experience that many of these companies that he talks about are really harming people. And it's the same model across the board. It's fractionalized coins in weird fractions. Like the U.S. Mint does 1/2, 1/4, 1/10. Okay, cool. They make 1 ounce gold. Okay. When you see 1.5 ounce, 1.25 ounce, 1/3 of an ounce, these are all odd weights, and they do that by, on purpose so that they can sell, they being these mints, whether it be the Crown Mint or the Royal Canadian Mint or the whatever, the Perth Mint, they allow people or companies to buy dies, if you will, a mold or a die in an odd weight and in an odd designation, like Crown Guinea. What the heck is that? But if it were a Britannia, no, that's not going to fly. Or if it's a Maple Leaf, no, that ain't going to fly. But if it's a Canadian black bear, well, there is no Canadian black bear unless you want it, sir. At 1.25 ounce, it can be yours too. And that's exactly what they're doing. Run. But watch the video with Dale Whitaker. Google him, buy his book. Not just on my channel. He's going all over the place trying to wake people up to what you and I have tried to do here for the last year. So, yeah, they're out there. They're real. Give us a call. We'll tell you if you got in trouble. And when it costs more to borrow real silver, the market is screaming, we don't have enough metal. These lease rates are normally 1/4 or 0.5%, not 8 or 9%. When you put backwardation in, that seals the deal to me. That means don't promise me silver next month. I want it right now. And that only happens when trust breaks. And for all of the people out there who are being told that this is the top, this is just like 2011. 2011 was leverage and speculation, right? And you had traders that were speculating with leverage, and when they raised the margins, they all got kneecapped. Here they raised the margin the day after Christmas by 30%, and it doesn't do anything but just a little speed bump as the big money comes in and buys the most, or stands for delivery, the most that's ever been delivered in the history of the COMEX market since 1974. So it's not working. These people don't trade on margin. These big sovereign wealth funds and, governments and Teslas and Samsungs. And today is not about leverage and speculation. That's the speed bump. Today is structural shortages across the world, a declining mine supply 6th year in a row, exploding industrial demand. We see that everywhere, especially with AI and photovoltaic and all the way down through military and everything else that we've covered copiously. But it's the sovereign and the industrial buyers competing for the same metal where, it's now critical. And I think that's something to me where, the people who analyze the markets and tell you, like your financial advisor, this isn't a trade. This is infrastructure. And I think you don't permanently top when supply is shrinking and demand is is growing.